Alright, so in this video I'm going to show you how to take a bad photo that is not so interesting like this one here and turn it into a postable like monster that will make your mama proud by using Lightroom. And there might be a little Photoshop trick in there for you guys too. Alright, so once again, welcome to Lightroom. This is the photo that we are going to work with today. I chose this because it's a little bit crooked, it's slightly overexposed, and I believe we can create a good photo out of this, okay? Now I'm also going to assume that you know the basics of the tool that we're going to use, so this video won't, drag out forever. But for every tool, I'll link a video up here with a detailed explanation if that's something that you like. All right, so the first thing that I do is to straighten out the photo. So we go down here, and if you see transform, this tab here, press level, and it automatically straightens it out. And I think this looks nice. Next thing is to do a crop, and you can see here, crop overlay. And we're gonna find a nice crop. Now for Instagram, which is where I'm gonna post this, the aspect ratio is 5:4, so this one here, and we're just gonna find a nice little crop. Now composition is super important. If you look at the super good photographers, their composition is on point. So when I'm thinking about composition, I'm like establishing what is my subject. So our subject is definitely this little birdie here, like squeak, squeak. So I want it to be like somewhere centered, but I also want this to be a little bit high. So we're gonna find here. So now this photo is fun because we have a little problem. We have here in the corner, there isn't really space because I was handholding the photo and it became crooked. We don't have the space here, but this we can actually fix in Photoshop afterwards once we've done all the adjustments, which we're actually creating a little extra space. So I think I'll show you how I do it in a second. So I'm just gonna find a crop that I like. I like this cropping. Again, we'll fix this in a second, okay? So first thing I do is to establish like a white point. I think the white point is all right. It's maybe a little bit too green, so we can bump this magenta up to right around here. You could always go and check auto if that's good, but I think for this one, it makes it way too orange. We're just gonna start like this, and then we might change it afterward. Now, because this photo is a little bit overexposed, I'm gonna drop down the highlights. We're gonna drop it a little bit much. Get back details here. Shadows, we might bump up shadows a little bit. And whites. Usually, when I bumped down the highlights so much like here, I usually compensate by going up with the whites, but this photo is already pretty overexposed. So I want to drop the whites like so. This is nice. And blacks, we can drop them down to right around here. Now this is a nice starting point. And as always with all the adjustments, I'll go back afterwards and change them. Now we save this clarity and dehaze and texture, and then vibrance and saturation. We'll come back to that. We come back to the tone curves. Now let's mess with the colors. Now before I touch the haze slider, recently I really much like to get a base color down here in the camera calibration. So what I've been working with is -30 in the blue, +20 in the red primary, and then +7 here. And I think this is a nice base. Now we're gonna change this a lot. I think this became too orange, but as a base tone, this I like a lot. So bear with me here. We go back up to the HSL slider, and I want the green in this photo to pop. So let's move the green up like so, get it more greener. And I also want to desaturate it, making it more moody. So just like so. And let's take down the luma to, yeah, this looks good to me. I would like these yellow things here to be more yellow, so yellow to be more yellow, So let's bump that up just a little bit like so. So really when I'm doing the HSL slider, I'm just testing, seeing what looks nice, and then finding the tones and then fine-tuning it. So let's see what we can do here. Now the blues, don't like it to be too turquoise like this. This was super popular. Like look like this is just completely ridiculous. It was very popular back in like 2015, 2016, but this is insane. So what I would like to do, I like to take up the aqua like quite a lot to get the aquas to become a blue. I like to desaturate the aquas a lot. It's just like a look that I like a lot. And we might even take it down, and then this we might move it a little bit more to the turquoise side, and let's desaturate this also quite a lot. So now it looks like this. Now one thing I often do to get the sky to become more dramatic is to make the luminance on the blue, drop it down. But we have a problem on this photo, is that the bird, a little birdie right here, it's also a little bit blue here. So when we drop it down, we are essentially taking away the color in these beautiful feathers here. So I don't like that for this photo, and we have other tricks to get this to become more moody. So we might just leave it as is. Now orange, I think we can do a little bit orange. That is fun because I think there is a lot of orange in the feathers. Let me see. Yes, nice. Okay, so let's drop this down maybe to 25. Now going this much down with the reds and the orange for skin tones would be a disaster, but luckily this little bird doesn't have human skin tones, so we can actually do that here. So let me see, we go here. All right, so now I found a few tones that I think is light. As always, I might come back to this, so let me see before and after. There's already a nice difference. Now, what we are going to do now is to sharpen the image. So here in details, I like to often go like pretty high with this to 80, but I use the masking. So if you hold an Alt and go up here, you can see that the only thing that the white things, that is the only thing that's going to be affected, you know, by the sharpness. So I like to have the edges pretty sharp. So right around here looks good to me. I don't think we have to do any noise reduction now because like it's ISO 100. So this is just good as is. Now lens correction, this is actually something I usually do in the beginning. So remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. These I often check. Now for the tone curves, we're just going to do like a simple S-curve with a little modification. So we do one node here, and one node here, like this. And I'm actually going to do one more here. And you see why in a second. So we do this up just a little bit. A cool little tip when you're using the tone curve is you hold in Alt, it makes everything very slow. So if you don't hold in Alt, it can be hard to like get it correctly, like accurately, but holding in Alt and it moves super slow. So do it like this. We can take it up just a tiny bit. And here I actually like to move the darkest part of the image and make them a little bit darker like so. And move this up a little bit and down. Because I think that if we move this too much down, it's going to become very muddy. So we have we're a little unfortunate that like the neck of the bird is black and it like kind of blends in with the dark background, but hey, we don't get it all, you know. Now let's move up to clarity. I like to do the clarity like 100. I think this looks fabulous. I'm kidding. So what I like to do with clarity at the moment is drop it down like to 25 and it creates this dream-like effect that I super much like. Like drop it 20 for this photo. And to compensate for the lack of sharpness, we can up the texture. We can up it up to like 28, get back the texture. And I'm gonna probably paint on a little bit of clarity on the bird. Now for vibrance, I like to take up the vibrance quite a bit and then drop down the saturation. This is just a look that I really much enjoy at the moment, and I think like before and after is starting to look nice. And I think we can even add a little of this contrast too, just like we can start with 15. This is beautiful, and I would even drop this down a little bit more, like so. So without a doubt, where most of the magic for my photos happen is up here in the brushes, the radial and gradial filters. Like I love this. So we can start with the radial filter because I'm constantly thinking about like where is the subject and how can we close in on the subject to create a little more like three-dimensional photo. And as we've already established, this little birdie is our subject. So I create a circle around it like this. If you press O, you can see what you're doing. And we are gonna do it like this. I think looks nice. And then we're gonna drag down the exposure like this. I think looks beautiful. Now we're gonna do one more. So press enter, you can do another one. And now we're gonna brighten up the little birdie. So if you press invert right here, you are now inverting it. Press O, you can see what you're doing. We would drag up the feather quite a bit like so. And here we are going to, let me see, we can just add up the exposure just a tiny bit like so. Up with the whites just a little bit. We took down a lot of the whites there, so we can take it up right here. The contrast here is super nice to make the bird like separate from the background. So let's up the contrast just a little bit. And you know what? We can even take up the exposure just a tiny bit. Like so. And you can see this is like just this little adjustment before and after is huge. Now we've like established the subject and like closing in on it. I love this. Now next up is the gradient filter. This one here, and this I love a lot. So we are gonna do very similar, but now we're gonna drag it down and we're gonna try to make the sky more dramatic. I have a whole video on how to make dramatic sky. I'll link it up here. But for now, we're gonna do it like something like this. Drag down the exposure just a tad. I would like to drag up the clarity to get more oomph in the clouds. And then the dehaze, we can probably take a little bit up to just make the clouds a little bit more dramatic. I think this is awesome. Now, here is also a cool thing. We make another one and we do it like this. And this I realized not so long ago, because this, ladies and gentlemen, this tip is awesome. Take a look at this. So I want to close in on the bird by dropping down the exposure. But what happens also is that the flowers become very dark, and I would like them to pop. So when I was like, okay, what can I do? So look, we do it like this, and here like we can close, like make it like this, make the foreground pretty dark. Now I like this. I think this looks awesome, but I would like for the flowers to pop more. So what you can do is to go to the brush tool, and you're basically just gonna brush on all the flowers like this. So you can see we brush now on the on all the flowers. All right, so once I'm done, I've painted all of them. Look at this. You can take the exposure, and if you drag it up, we make the flowers pop from beneath the gradient filter. And I think this is so nice. So we can drag it up like tiny bit like this. This is maybe a little bit too much, but just here, like this is huge. Take a look at this photo here that I made. Here is the same thing. You can see the flowers that are popping beneath here, and I think it's beautiful. I take it off, and it's not nearly as nice in my opinion. So I was working with the gradient filter, and I went a little bit heavy here. And then I was like, hey, we don't see the foreground. I would like the foreground to be a little bit more interesting. And then I was like, hey, I could just paint all the flowers and boom, drag up the exposure, and voila, it pops out. So we're doing the same for this photo. And I think this is such a neat little trick, because now the flowers, the foreground, to me, it becomes a little bit more interesting. So now we're gonna paint the bird. So I'm just gonna paint the bird and make that pop a little bit. Like so. Take up the exposure just a little bit to make it pop. We can take up the whites just a tiny bit. I would like to take up the clarity just a little bit to make the bird shine a little bit more, and maybe shadows just a tiny bit. And then the contrast, this is where you can compensate for all of this and make it bird pop from the background like so. And I think this looks beautiful. All right, so what I do now is to go down all the way here to the effects. I like to add a slight vignette. We already made our own vignette, but I like to add at least a little vignette of our own. I like vignette, but then I like to feather it out to 100% and put the highlights in. This makes the highlights show in. So this I like a lot. And grain, I like to have a little grain. Let's just have 15, so it's not too much, but a slight grain. Now, before we take and fix this little silly thing here, I just want to I see like a few slight adjustments I want to make. I want to drop down the blues even more, like so. I think looks pretty. And you know what? I think we can up the orange pretty much, like so, and the reds like this. I think this is, this is gorgeous. All right, so the way we fix this here is so simple. We just hop into Photoshop. So if you right click on your photos, go edit in Adobe Photoshop, boom, click that. And then, we just wait 1 second and computer is, working. All right, so welcome to Photoshop. The way we fix this is very simple. Let's just zoom in a little bit on it, and you have the stamp tool. So if you press S, you get the stamp tool, and by using the stamp tool, you can basically stamp on from here to here. So by holding Alt, now we're gonna stamp on here, and we just stamp it on. So we paint on this section here to here. So it's like ridiculously simple. Boom, and because this is just a corner, it's not going to show. And now we've essentially created space in our photo. Now, if you want to jump back into Lightroom and do a few final adjustments from Photoshop, it's very simple. Just press Ctrl+V like this, and then you press save and yes. Now it's open up in Lightroom as a new file that is a TIFF file, and you can do a few final adjustments that are new to your photo if there is anything else you want to finish. So that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask in comments down below. If you could smack that like button for me, it would really help me out. Consider subscribing. I create bunch of videos. This is basically just my current workflow for creating these Instagram photos. So yes, there's nothing more. Thank you so much for watching. I've already said that. Why am I still talking? I'll catch you guys in the next video. I'm out. Peace.